Welcome to Level Audiobook. Today we're exploring Read People Like a Book by Patrick King, a guide to understanding the hidden patterns behind people's behavior. Every action, every decision, and every reaction a person makes is influenced by their past experiences, emotional needs, and psychological state. If we learn to recognize these patterns, we can begin to predict how people will think, feel, and act in the future. Think about it. Every individual is, in a sense, a living story. Their present behavior is shaped by what they've been through, the fears they carry, and the desires they chase. If we pay close attention, we can learn to read between the lines of their words and uncover the truth of who they are. Let's start with the most fundamental principle. People behave in patterns. Human behavior isn't random. It's the result of habits, triggers, and coping mechanisms that form over time. Once you identify these patterns, you begin to see consistency where others only see unpredictability. For example, imagine you have a friend who becomes angry at even the smallest criticism. At first, you might think he simply has a short temper, but when you look deeper, you notice that he especially reacts when someone points out his mistakes. Why? Perhaps in his childhood he was often scolded, made to feel that he could never be right. Now, as an adult, every reminder of a mistake threatens his sense of worth, and his instinctive reaction is anger. When you recognize this pattern, you realize that his outbursts aren't about the present moment. They are echoes of his past. And once you see that, you can predict how he will react in similar situations in the future. Consider another example, someone who always puts others first, even at their own expense. On the surface, they seem generous and selfless, but look closer and you may find a deeper motivation. Perhaps they grew up in an environment where love and approval were given only when they sacrificed their own needs. Helping others isn't just kindness, it's a way to feel valued. And because this strategy worked in the past, they continue it in the present, often without realizing why. Understanding these patterns doesn't just help us predict behavior, it also allows us to approach people with greater empathy. Instead of judging someone for being angry, defensive, or overly selfless, we begin to see the roots of their behavior. Now here's an important point. Behavior can be shaped both by personality and by environment. Some people are chameleons. They adapt their behavior to match the setting. A person might be outgoing and funny with friends, but serious and reserved at work. This flexibility shows that their behavior is context-driven. Others, however, are consistent no matter where they are. Someone who is always serious or always playful is showing us something deeper. This is not just situational, it's a reflection of their inner personality. When you see consistency across different environments, you're likely observing someone's core character, not just their adaptation to circumstances. But here's the challenge. People often wear masks. They project confidence, kindness, or indifference, but these are not always genuine. If you watch closely, though, you can usually see cracks in the mask. For instance, imagine a colleague who always tries to appear confident. He speaks loudly, makes bold claims, and insists that nothing bothers him. But when he's asked a difficult question, he quickly changes the subject, avoids eye contact, or becomes defensive. The mask of confidence slips, revealing insecurity underneath. Learning to read these moments teaches you to separate a person's true self from the role they want to play. And once again, you'll notice a pattern. When faced with pressure, the same insecurities reveal themselves time and again. Patterns are also tied to needs. Every human being has psychological needs. Some crave attention, some need to feel in control, some constantly seek approval, while others want to avoid being wrong. These needs drive behavior far more than most people realize. Take the person who always insists on having the last word in a conversation. At first, it seems like arrogance, but if you look closer, you'll see it's a need, a deep desire to be acknowledged, to feel important. Once you identify this, you can predict how they'll react if someone else steals the spotlight. They'll find a way to reclaim it. Finally, people's decisions also follow patterns. No one makes choices in a vacuum. Our decisions are shaped by our past experiences, our fears, and our desires. Imagine someone who constantly avoids new opportunities because they're afraid of failure. Perhaps in the past, they took a risk, failed, and felt the sting of rejection. Now, every time a new door opens, their first instinct is to close it. On the other hand, someone who jumps at every chance may have learned that success only comes to those who act quickly. By studying these choices, you begin to see not just what people want, but what they fear, and that knowledge gives you extraordinary insight into their future behavior. In short, people live in patterns of thought, of feeling, and of action. Once you train yourself to see them, you begin to read people not as random puzzles, but as stories unfolding in predictable ways. And this is where our journey begins. In the next part, we'll look at how people often reveal themselves through contradictions, the differences between what they say and what they actually do, and how body language and subtle cues can expose the truth behind their words. Part 1. Words versus actions. One of the most important lessons in reading people is this: believe behavior over words. Words are easy to control. But people can tell you what they think you want to hear. They can make promises, deny their feelings, or put on an act. But their consistent behavior, their body language, and their unconscious signals tell the real story. Let's start with contradictions. Imagine a coworker who always says, "I don't care what people think." Yet every time he's criticized, he becomes upset for days. What's the truth? His words project indifference, but his actions reveal deep sensitivity to other people's opinions. When words and actions don't match, actions always win. This mismatch is common because people often want to maintain a certain image. They may want to look confident, independent, or calm, even when they're not. Sometimes they're not even aware of the contradiction themselves. That's why watching actions is far more revealing than listening to statements. So how do we read behavior more accurately? We turn to body language, the unspoken side of communication. Body language is powerful because it's less conscious than words. Someone can carefully choose their sentences, but their body often leaks the truth. Let's look at some examples. Posture is one of the clearest indicators. A person who leans forward and keeps an open posture is usually engaged and interested. In contrast, crossed arms, turned shoulders, or leaning back can signal defensiveness or disengagement. Repeated fidgeting, tapping fingers, bouncing legs, shifting weight, often indicates nervousness, impatience, or restlessness. Eye contact is another major clue. Steady eye contact typically suggests confidence and sincerity, while avoiding eye contact can mean discomfort, insecurity, or even dishonesty. But extremes are also revealing. Someone who stares too intensely may be trying to dominate or compensate for insecurity. Then there are micro-expressions, tiny, split-second facial expressions that appear before someone has time to hide them. A quick frown before a forced smile can betray disagreement. A flash of fear in the eyes can appear even when someone says, "I'm not worried." These micro-expressions are windows into emotions that people may not want to admit. Of course, it's important not to overinterpret a single gesture. A person folding their arms might just be cold. Someone avoiding eye contact might be shy, not deceptive. That's why professionals always look for clusters of signals. When multiple signs align, closed posture, stiff lips, averted gaze, the interpretation becomes far more reliable. Tone of voice is another layer of body language. It's not just what people say, but how they say it. A calm, steady voice often reflects confidence, while a sudden rise in pitch may indicate stress or defensiveness. Speaking unusually fast can show anxiety. Speaking unusually slow may suggest hesitation or concealment. These vocal cues often reveal the emotional state behind the words. Context is crucial too. Signals don't exist in isolation. For example, avoiding eye contact during a casual conversation may signal discomfort, but avoiding eye contact while recalling a painful memory may simply reflect vulnerability. That's why the best approach is to study behavior in context and compare it with a person's baseline, their normal behavior when they're relaxed. Establishing a baseline is essential. If someone normally speaks quickly, then fast speech isn't a sign of nervousness. It's just their style. But if that same person suddenly slows down when answering a sensitive question, that change is meaningful. It's the deviation from the baseline that matters most. When you put all of this together, actions, body language, tone, context, and baseline, you gain a much clearer picture of a person's true feelings. You stop being misled by words alone and start noticing the signals people can't easily control. Why does this matter? Because it allows you to detect insincerity, recognize hidden emotions, and respond more effectively in your relationships. It helps you avoid manipulation, build trust with those who are genuine, and better understand the unspoken needs of those around you. When you truly start to observe people, you realize that they're always communicating, even in silence. Every gesture, every glance, every shift in posture tells a story. Learning to read these signals gives you an advantage in both personal and professional life. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into what truly drives human behavior. The two fundamental forces behind nearly every decision, the pursuit of happiness and the avoidance of pain. Part 2. Motivation, happiness versus pain. At the heart of every human decision lies a simple truth. People act either to gain pleasure or to avoid pain. These two forces shape almost everything we do, from the smallest choices to the biggest life decisions. If you want to read people accurately, you must understand which of these forces is guiding them. Let's start with the pursuit of happiness. Some people are motivated by the promise of reward. They work hard because success brings them joy. They invest in relationships because love and companionship make them feel fulfilled. They take risks because the possibility of growth excites them. For these people, happiness is the fuel that drives them forward. Others are guided more strongly by the avoidance of pain. They work hard not to achieve glory, but to avoid failure. They stay in safe jobs not because they love them, but because they fear instability. They avoid relationships not because they don't crave love, but because they're terrified of heartbreak. Their decisions are shaped not by what they want to gain, but by what they're desperate to avoid. Take two employees given a new project. The first accepts eagerly, seeing it as an opportunity to learn, shine, and advance. The second hesitates, already imagining the risk of making mistakes and facing criticism. Same situation, two very different reactions, one driven by the pursuit of happiness, the other by the avoidance of pain. The same principle applies in everyday life. Suggest to a friend that they join a gym. One might think, well, this will make me healthier, stronger, and more confident. That's motivation through happiness. Another might think, well, if I don't start exercising, I'll gain weight and face health problems. That's motivation through avoiding pain. Both may go to the gym, but their reasons and their long-term consistency will differ. Understanding which force dominates a person gives you predictive power. If someone is motivated by happiness, they'll chase opportunities, rewards, and recognition. If they're motivated by avoiding pain, they'll resist risk, prefer safety, and often act cautiously. Even emotions like anger can be traced back to these motivations. A person who explodes at criticism may not just be angry. They may be protecting themselves from the pain of feeling unworthy. A person who insists on controlling everything may not simply be demanding. They may fear the chaos that comes with uncertainty. Fear, in particular, is one of the strongest pain avoidance motivators. Some people are deeply concerned about their image in society, so they carefully control how they dress, speak, and behave, all to avoid rejection. Others fear financial instability, so they save obsessively and avoid any unnecessary spending. Still others fear vulnerability, so they build walls in relationships, refusing to trust easily. Once you identify a person's fear, you can predict how they'll act when that fear is triggered. The cautious friend who has been hurt in the past will hesitate before trusting again. The status-conscious colleague will spend extravagantly to maintain appearances. The safety-driven employee will avoid new challenges even if they promise growth. This insight isn't just about predicting behavior, it also allows you to respond with empathy. If you know someone is acting from fear, you can approach them with patience instead of frustration. If you see that someone is chasing happiness, you can support and encourage their ambition. In business, this principle becomes especially powerful. Customers are motivated either by what they stand to gain or what they stand to lose. One buyer chooses a product because it makes life easier and more enjoyable. Another chooses it because not having it feels like a risk or disadvantage. Understanding which motivator matters more to your audience allows you to communicate in a way that resonates with them directly. The same holds true for parenting. A child may study hard because they enjoy learning and want to earn praise. Another may study hard simply to avoid punishment. Both may achieve good grades, but their motivations are very different. And if you don't recognize this, you may misread the child's true relationship with success. Ultimately, whether it's happiness or pain, these motivations form the hidden compass guiding people's choices. By watching carefully, you can see which direction a person leans toward. And with that knowledge, you can anticipate their reactions long before they make them. In the next part, we'll explore how these motivations fit into a larger framework of human needs, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy. By understanding where someone is on this ladder of needs, you gain even deeper insight into what drives them and what they will do next. Part 3. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. To truly understand what drives human behavior, we need to look beyond individual fears and desires and explore the broader framework of human motivation. One of the most influential models comes from psychologist Abraham Maslow, the hierarchy of needs. Maslow suggested that human needs can be arranged like a ladder, with each level representing a different set of priorities. As people satisfy the lower needs, they naturally move up to pursue higher ones. Understanding where someone is on this ladder gives you remarkable insight into their decisions and behavior. At the base are physiological needs, the most basic requirements for survival: food, water, shelter, rest. When a person is struggling here, these needs dominate everything else. A man without a job or a secure place to live isn't worried about self-improvement or prestige. His focus is on survival. Until these needs are met, higher motivations rarely matter. The next level is safety and security. Once a person's immediate physical needs are met, they seek stability, steady income, health, safe housing, and protection from danger. For someone at this stage, decisions will be shaped by a desire for predictability. They may avoid risks, cling to stable jobs, and prefer routine over uncertainty. Above that lies the level of social needs. Humans are deeply social creatures. Once survival and safety are secured, people begin to crave love, friendship, and belonging. This is the stage where relationships, community, and acceptance become priorities. Someone here may place more value on companionship than on career advancement. Their choices are guided by the need to feel connected and included. Next comes esteem. At this level, people want recognition, respect, and a sense of accomplishment. They pursue achievements not just for personal satisfaction but for validation from others. They want their contributions acknowledged, their skills admired, and their efforts rewarded. This is why many people chase titles, awards, or social media likes. It fulfills their need for esteem. At the top of the hierarchy is self-actualization. This is the pursuit of one's fullest potential. People at this level are less concerned with survival, safety, or external approval. Instead, they seek personal growth, creativity, purpose, and contribution to something larger than themselves. This could be expressed through art, innovation, service, or lifelong learning. Now, here's why this matters when you're trying to read people. By recognizing which level dominates a person's life, you can predict what will influence their decisions most strongly. If someone is worried about money or health, their choices will revolve around security. If someone is seeking companionship, they will prioritize relationships even over career growth. If someone is hungry for recognition, they will be driven by opportunities to prove themselves and gain respect. And if someone is operating at the self-actualization level, appeals to fame or wealth won't impress them. They are motivated by purpose and impact. Consider a few examples. A person who refuses to leave a secure but uninspiring job may be stuck at the safety level. Another who constantly seeks validation online may be focused on esteem. A person who volunteers, writes, or creates without concern for reward may be operating at the level of self-actualization. This hierarchy also explains why people sometimes seem irrational. If you try to inspire someone with talk of personal growth when they are struggling to pay their bills, it won't connect, because they are stuck on a lower level of the ladder. Understanding their position allows you to meet them where they are. And remember, people don't climb this ladder in a straight line. Life circumstances can push them up or down. Someone who has achieved esteem may suddenly fall back to focusing on safety after losing a job. Someone at self-actualization may shift attention to relationships after experiencing loneliness. The key is to observe carefully. What concerns dominate their conversations? What goals do they chase most eagerly? Where do they invest their time and energy? The answers will show you where they are on Maslow's hierarchy, and that tells you what truly drives them. In the next part, we'll explore how people protect themselves emotionally. These unconscious strategies, known as defense mechanisms, are powerful clues to understanding hidden fears and insecurities. Part 4. Defense mechanisms. Every human being carries an ego, the sense of identity and self-worth that protects us from emotional harm. But when that ego feels threatened, the mind often steps in with hidden strategies to shield us. These strategies are called defense mechanisms, and they operate quietly in the background of our behavior. The fascinating part is this: most people don't even realize when they're using them. But if you learn to recognize these patterns, you gain insight into someone's deepest fears, insecurities, and unspoken feelings. Let's explore some of the most common defense mechanisms and how they reveal the inner world of the people around us. The first, and perhaps the most familiar, is denial. Denial happens when someone refuses to accept reality because it feels too painful. Imagine a person who insists their relationship is fine, even though their partner has clearly pulled away, or a smoker who brushes off the risks of lung disease, saying, "It won't happen to me." Denial protects the ego from fear and loss, but it also blinds people from making necessary changes. If you notice someone constantly dismissing obvious problems, you may be looking at denial in action. Another defense mechanism is projection. This occurs when someone attributes their own unwanted feelings to someone else. For example, a coworker who secretly feels insecure about their abilities might accuse others of being incompetent. Or a jealous partner may constantly accuse their spouse of being unfaithful when in fact the suspicion comes from their own hidden fears. Projection allows people to avoid facing uncomfortable truths about themselves by imagining that those traits exist in others. Next is rationalization. This is when someone invents logical explanations to justify behaviors or outcomes that are actually driven by fear or insecurity. For instance, a student who fails an exam might say, "I didn't really care about this subject anyway," instead of admitting they didn't study enough. Or an employee who misses out on a promotion might say, "That job would have been too stressful," masking the disappointment of rejection. Rationalization protects self-esteem, but it also prevents growth because the person never confronts the real reason behind their failures. Then we have repression, one of the most powerful and subtle defenses. Repression happens when painful memories or feelings are pushed deep into the unconscious mind, hidden from awareness. For example, someone who experienced trauma in childhood may grow up unable to recall certain details, yet the emotions still shape their behavior, perhaps through anxiety, fear, or anger. Repression is the mind's way of locking away pain, but those buried feelings often leak out in unexpected ways. Another common mechanism is displacement. This is when someone transfers their feelings from the real source of stress to a safer target. Picture a man who feels powerless under a demanding boss. Instead of expressing anger at work, he comes home and snaps at his family. Or a student frustrated by exam pressure kicks their dog instead of addressing their own anxiety. Displacement reveals that the emotion is real, but it's being redirected to avoid confrontation with the true source. Regression is another telling behavior. In moments of stress, some people unconsciously revert to earlier, childlike patterns of behavior. An adult might throw a tantrum when things don't go their way, sulk in silence after an argument, or seek excessive comfort like a child would. This mechanism provides temporary relief, but it also shows that the person hasn't yet developed healthier coping strategies for stress. One of the more sophisticated defenses is intellectualization. This happens when someone detaches from their emotions and focuses purely on logic or facts. Imagine a doctor delivering tragic news to a patient but describing it in purely clinical terms without showing empathy. Or a person who, instead of grieving after a breakup, dives into analyzing the psychology of relationships. Intellectualization creates distance from pain, but it also blocks emotional healing. Finally, let's look at reaction formation. This occurs when someone behaves in the opposite way to how they actually feel in order to hide their true emotions. For example, a person who feels deep resentment toward a colleague might go out of their way to be overly friendly to them. Or someone struggling with insecurity might act overly confident and boastful. Reaction formation can be confusing to outsiders, but if you recognize the pattern, you'll see that it often points to hidden fears or desires. Now, why does all this matter? Because defense mechanisms aren't just psychological concepts. They play out in daily life, in conversations, in workplaces, in relationships. When you notice that someone is projecting, you realize their accusations say more about them than about you. When you spot rationalization, you understand that excuses may be covering up disappointment. And when you see denial, you know that confronting the issue directly may only push the person further away. Understanding defense mechanisms also helps us with compassion. Instead of judging someone's outburst, avoidance, or strange behavior, we can recognize it as an attempt to protect their ego. This doesn't mean we excuse toxic actions, but it does mean we gain perspective. For example, when a friend lashes out without reason, instead of taking it personally, you might see it as displacement of stress from another area of their life. Most importantly, recognizing these patterns in ourselves is the first step to growth. Every one of us uses defense mechanisms. The key is awareness. When you catch yourself rationalizing, denying, or projecting, you can pause, reflect, and choose a healthier response. Growth begins when protection of the ego no longer prevents us from facing reality. So, defense mechanisms are like masks people wear, not to deceive others, but to protect themselves. If you can learn to look beyond the mask, you'll see the hidden fears, insecurities, and needs that truly drive human behavior. And with that insight, you'll not only read people more effectively, you'll also relate to them with greater patience, empathy, and influence. Part 5. Applications and Conclusion. Now that we've explored patterns of behavior, the gap between words and actions, body language, motivation, Maslow's hierarchy, and defense mechanisms, the question is, how do we put all of this knowledge into practice? How do we use it not just to analyze others, but to build stronger connections, improve our relationships, and make smarter decisions? The first application is in personal relationships. Think about your closest friends, your family members, or your partner. Often, conflicts arise not because of what is said, but because of what is meant. By learning to read the patterns behind behavior, you can approach disagreements with greater clarity. For example, if your partner gets defensive whenever their mistakes are pointed out, instead of reacting with anger, you might recognize that their behavior stems from insecurity or past experiences. This allows you to approach them with patience and reassurance rather than frustration. Similarly, if a friend constantly seeks attention, you may realize that this is tied to their deeper need for belonging or recognition. Instead of being annoyed, you can decide whether to support that need or set healthy boundaries. When you understand the motivations behind people's actions, empathy becomes easier, and empathy is the foundation of stronger relationships. The second application is in professional life. In the workplace, the ability to read people is a superpower. It can help you build better teams, manage conflicts, and even excel in leadership. For instance, if you're a manager, recognizing that one employee values stability while another craves recognition allows you to tailor your leadership style. The first might thrive with clear structure and security, while the second might need challenging projects and public acknowledgement. When you match people's needs to their roles, performance and satisfaction both increase. In negotiation and sales, this skill becomes even more powerful. If a customer is motivated by security, you emphasize how your product reduces risk. If they're motivated by growth, you highlight how it opens new opportunities. By reading not just what someone says, but how they act and react, you can adjust your approach to meet their true motivations. The third application is in self-awareness. While it's tempting to use these insights only to read others, the truth is that the greatest transformation happens when we turn the mirror on ourselves. Ask yourself, what patterns shape my behavior? Do I react with anger, defensiveness, or avoidance in certain situations? Which level of Maslow's hierarchy am I currently operating from? Am I driven by security, esteem, or self-actualization? Which defense mechanisms do I rely on when I feel threatened? By identifying these tendencies, you begin to take control of your own life. Instead of being unconsciously driven by past experiences, fears, or insecurities, you can make conscious choices. You can shift from reacting to responding, from repeating old patterns to creating new ones. This is where personal growth begins. Another application is in communication. Imagine you're in a meeting and a colleague insists they're not upset, but their crossed arms, tightened jaw, and clipped tone tell a different story. Instead of ignoring those signals, you can acknowledge their emotions gently and respectfully. I sense this might be frustrating. Do you want to talk it through? That small act of recognition can diffuse tension and build trust. The ability to read body language, facial expressions, and hidden emotions also makes you a more persuasive communicator. You can adjust your tone, your words, and your approach based on the signals you observe, ensuring that your message is not just heard, but truly received. Finally, the ultimate application of all these insights is in building influence. Influence is not about manipulation. It's about understanding people so deeply that you can connect with them in meaningful ways. When you understand someone's motivations, fears, and needs, you can inspire them, support them, and guide them toward growth. Whether you're a teacher inspiring students, a leader guiding a team, or a parent raising a child, influence comes from empathy and understanding. As we bring this journey to a close, let's reflect on the bigger picture. Reading people is not about tricking them, exposing them, or gaining an unfair advantage. It's about connection. It's about seeing beyond the surface, beyond the words, and into the heart of human behavior. Every action has a reason, every pattern tells a story, and every person, no matter how confusing they may seem, is simply trying to meet their needs, avoid pain, and seek happiness. When you master this art, you don't just predict what people will do, you also learn how to respond with wisdom. You gain the ability to de-escalate conflicts, strengthen bonds, and create environments where trust can grow. More importantly, you gain insight into yourself, breaking free from the invisible patterns that may have held you back. So the next time you're in a conversation, don't just listen to the words. Watch the body language. Notice the patterns. Ask yourself what needs and fears might be shaping this person's response. And then, instead of reacting on the surface, connect with them at the deeper level of who they truly are. That's how you read people like a book. That's how you turn knowledge into understanding and understanding into influence. And that's how you transform not just your relationships, but your entire approach to life. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights, and I'll see you in the next video.